The day my wife's best friend asked me, in front of 30 people, when I was finally going to leave my wife, the entire backyard fell dead silent. Then she looked around, eyes glassy, and said the sentence that detonated my whole life. Wait, he doesn't know? My name is Carter Jameson. I'm 37 years old. Up until that Saturday in June, I would have told you I was doing pretty well. I owned a growing construction management firm, we had a comfortable house in a decent Portland suburb, and I'd been married to my wife, Victoria, for 9 years. No kids yet. That was always later, according to Victoria. She said she wanted to lock in her marketing career first, hit a certain position before she stepped back. I never doubted her. When you trust someone completely, you don't go looking for cracks. The barbecue was her idea. She lived for this kind of thing, playing hostess, giving tours of our dream backyard. I'd spent months on it, a custom stone patio I designed myself, an outdoor kitchen with a built-in grill, a gas fire pit I'd laid and stacked brick by brick after work. It was the kind of space that made people say, "Man, you should do this professionally." And I'd have to explain that, yeah, I sort of already did. Around 30 people showed up that afternoon. Most were Victoria's coworkers from the agency and their partners, plus my business partner, Drew, and his wife, Cassidy. It was one of those warm, lazy afternoons. Music low, beer bottles sweating on the table, the smell of charcoal and marinade hanging in the air. Victoria's best friend, Amber Hayes, rolled in around 2 o'clock, already too loud for that time of day. Amber was a real estate agent, twice divorced at 34, and one of those people who mistake no filter for a personality. Get a few glasses of wine in her, and anything she thought instantly became something she said. Victoria used to laugh it off. "That's just Amber," she'd say. "Harmless drunk girl talk." I was at the grill when Amber came wobbling over, a nearly full wine glass sloshing onto our new pavers. The chicken thighs were right at that perfect point. Skin blistering, edges starting to crisp. I was focused on not burning them when she leaned against the counter. "Carter," she drawled, swaying a little. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure, Amber," I said, still watching the meat. "What's up?" She squinted at me, then spoke loud enough that half the backyard could hear. "When are you finally going to leave her?" The spatula stopped mid-flip. The change in the backyard was instant. Conversations trailed off, laughter died, even the music from the Bluetooth speaker seemed too loud suddenly. I felt every pair of eyes pivot toward us. "I'm sorry, what?" I asked, carefully setting the spatula down. Amber took a slow drink, completely unaware of the shockwave she'd just set off. "When are you going to leave her?" she repeated, gesturing vaguely towards the house. "I mean, you've got to know by now, right?" My heart started hammering, and it wasn't from standing in front of a hot grill. "Know what, Amber?" For the first time, I saw a flicker of awareness cross her face. Her brows knitted together. It was like watching her wine-soaked brain rewind the last 30 seconds. "Oh," she whispered. Her gaze darted around at all the people staring. Her eyes went wide. "Oh, wait, he doesn't know." At that exact moment, Victoria stepped out of the house with a tray of burger buns. She took in the silent crowd, Amber's expression, my face. The color drained from her completely, and the tray slipped from her hands. Buns scattered across the patio, rolling under chairs and into flower beds. "Amber," Victoria snapped, her voice higher than usual, shaking. "What did you say?" "I just asked when Carter was going to leave you," Amber replied, still not fully grasping the situation. "I figured after everything with Brandon, he'd have already—" "Shut up," Victoria hissed. "Shut up right now." Brandon. The name hit me harder than the heat blasting off the grill. Brandon Pierce, the creative director from her agency, the guy whose name had been in our house so often he might as well have been a roommate. Brandon thinks we should change the whole strategy. Brandon's ideas are brilliant. Brandon is seriously the most talented person I've ever worked with.
Drew, who'd been in the middle of telling a story a minute ago, stepped closer and put his hand on my shoulder. "Carter," he murmured, "maybe we should take this inside." I couldn't move. I just stared at Victoria, at how completely white her face had gone, at the way her eyes shone with something that looked an awful lot like guilt. "How long?" I asked, my voice low. Victoria's eyes immediately filled with tears. "Carter, please, not here, not like this." "How long," I repeated, "have you been sleeping with Brandon?" A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Someone's plastic cup slipped out of their hand and clattered onto the stone. Cassidy grabbed Drew's arm like she needed something solid to hold on to. "8 months," Amber chimed in, as if she was being helpful. "Since the Christmas party. They've been together since then. Victoria said you were too wrapped up in work to notice." Victoria spun on her. "You absolute... I told you that in confidence." "Yeah, and you also told me you were gonna leave him months ago, but you keep stringing him along because you like his money and this nice house he built for you." For a second, it felt unreal, like I was watching a movie of someone else's life. I could see myself from above. The guy in the apron, tongs in hand, while his marriage disintegrated in front of 30 witnesses and a pile of burning chicken. "Is that true?" I asked Victoria, my voice somehow steady. "You're staying with me for my money?" "No," Victoria said, rushing towards me. "Carter, please, that's not... It's more complicated than that." "Uncomplicated, right now, in front of everyone. Tell me the truth." She looked around desperately. Some faces were wide-eyed and horrified. Others were carefully blank. A couple of people had that look, like this only confirmed what they suspected for a while.
I didn't mean for it to happen, Victoria began, and I noticed she didn't deny it. Brandon and we just connected. He understands me in ways that I don't, I finished for her. Got it. 8 months. That's 2 full seasons, around 240 days of waking up next to me, eating meals I cooked, kissing me goodbye in the mornings, while lying every single day. I never wanted to hurt you, Victoria sobbed. I was trying to figure out what to do, how to tell you. But you weren't going to leave, I cut in. According to Amber, you were just going to keep the affair going while you enjoyed the house I built and the life my business provides. Drew squeezed my shoulder tighter. Hey everyone, he called out, trying to sound calm. Maybe we should give them some space. Let's start heading out, okay? I shook my head. No. They can stay. I want witnesses for this. I locked eyes with Victoria. Did you ever love me? Or was I just the stable option you picked while you waited for something more exciting to come along? Of course I loved you, she cried. I still love you, Carter. But Brandon, he makes me feel alive in ways I haven't felt since we got married. Since we got married, I repeated slowly. So you've been unhappy almost the entire time, and instead of talking to me, you just enjoyed the benefits and looked for a better offer. Amber, still not done torching the place, threw in more gasoline. She's been planning to ask for half of everything in the divorce, she announced. Been talking to lawyers for what, 2 months now? Victoria whirled on her. Amber, I swear to God. Wait, I said, holding up my hand. You've been speaking to divorce lawyers while still sleeping in my bed, while still acting like we were planning a future together? Victoria opened her mouth, then shut it again. Finally, she nodded, barely. I needed to know what my options were, she whispered. Your options? I repeated, and suddenly a laugh ripped out of me. It wasn't happy. It was the kind of laughter that comes when something is so insane your brain can't process it any other way. I stood there in my own backyard, surrounded by people eating my food and drinking my beer, while my wife admitted she'd been planning how to gut me financially. Drew looked alarmed. Carter, man, maybe you should sit. I'm fine, I said, wiping at my eyes. Actually, I'm better than fine, because for the first time in 8 months, Victoria and I are finally having an honest conversation. I turned to her fully, really seeing her, and for the first time since I'd known her, I realized I was looking at a stranger.
Here's what's going to happen, I said. You're going to pack a bag and leave tonight. You can stay with Brandon or Amber or whoever's willing to take you in after this performance. Carter, please, Victoria begged. Can't we talk about this privately? Why? I asked quietly. You didn't care about privacy when you were sneaking around with another man. You didn't care about discretion when you were shopping for divorce lawyers behind my back. So no, this part we do right here with witnesses. I took my phone out of my pocket and unlocked it with hands that were surprisingly steady. What are you doing? Victoria asks, voice trembling. I'm texting my attorney, my thumb's already flying. By Monday morning, you'll have divorce papers. You want out? You've got it. I'm not going to drag this out or explore my options. I'll give you what you never had the decency to give me, clarity. Her eyes filled with fresh panic. What about the house? Of course, in the middle of her life exploding, her brain still found its way back to the asset column. What about it? I replied. This is our home, she said, grasping at something to hold on to. I've lived here for 9 years. And I bought it before we ever said I do, I said evenly. The deed's in my name. I paid for the land with money from the business I started before you were even in the picture. I designed the remodel. I paid for every stone, every cabinet, every light fixture out of premarital funds. I gestured around us, at the patio, the outdoor kitchen, the fire pit. You might want to double check with those lawyers you've been seeing in secret, but I'm pretty confident this place doesn't end up on your side of the ledger. The blood drained from her face. But I've lived here for 9 years, she repeated weakly, and you've been cheating on me for 8 months while preparing to walk away with half of everything I've built. So forgive me if I'm not feeling generous in the who gets what department. Cassidy stepped closer, her voice soft but firm. Victoria, you should call someone to pick you up. You really shouldn't be driving right now. I'll call Brandon, Amber offered, like she was suggesting we order a pizza instead of summoning my wife's affair partner to my house. She was still tipsy, still not fully grasping the nuclear-level damage she set off. Perfect, I said. Call the man she blew up our marriage for. Let him come clean up one mess for once. Victoria scanned the crowd, desperately searching for a friendly face, someone willing to step in and smooth this over, to tell me I was overreacting. But most people suddenly found their drinks, their phones, or the flagstone patio deeply fascinating. A few women had already huddled together in quiet pairs, eyes darting between us, no doubt replaying every interaction they'd ever seen and reinterpreting it under this new light. I'm going to go inside and pack, Victoria said finally, voice small. But Carter, this conversation isn't over. Yes, I said, meeting her eyes, it is. The only conversations we're having from now on will be through lawyers. She flinched like I hit her, then turned and walked into the house. What was left of the party hung suspended in weird, stunned silence. Then Drew cleared his throat and glanced at the smoking grill. So, do you want me to grab those chicken thighs? They're about 5 seconds from turning into charcoal.
For some reason, that broke the spell. A few people let out tight, awkward laughs. Someone nudged the volume up on the speaker. Conversations crept back to life. Quieter now, intense, full of sideways looks and half-whispered analysis. The scent of overcooked chicken and spilled beer hung heavy in the air. I dropped into one of the patio chairs I'd built last summer, the cushions sighing under my weight. A moment later, Cassidy appeared at my side and pressed a cold beer into my hand. "How are you doing?" she asked gently. "I have no idea," I said honestly. Part of me wants to throw up. Part of me wants to put my fist through a wall. Mostly I just feel hollow. Drew joined us, having managed to salvage most of the chicken. "For what it's worth," he said, sitting down, "I never liked Victoria. She always seemed more into the image of being married than the reality of it." "You never said anything," I replied. "Would you have listened?" he asked. I opened my mouth and shut it again. He was right. I'd been in love with the picture in my head, the beautiful, ambitious wife, the perfect house, the growing business. Anyone who tried to disturb that fantasy probably would have been written off as jealous or negative. Amber staggered over, looking more sober now that adrenaline and shame had burned through some of the alcohol. "Carter," she said, eyes shiny, "I am so sorry. I honestly thought you knew. Victoria always made it sound like
Like you guys had an understanding. An understanding, I repeated flatly. What kind of understanding? She said you two were basically roommates, Amber continued, wringing her hands, like you were staying together for convenience. She said you worked all the time, that you barely noticed her anymore, that the romance was dead and you were just coasting. She made it sound like you didn't really care. I thought back over the last year. It was true. I'd been busy. 3 big contracts had landed back to back. I'd been up early, home late, juggling schedules and crews and budgets. But I'd never thought I was neglecting her. I'd still insisted on date nights on Fridays. We'd done weekend getaways when we could squeeze them in. I'd asked about her day, her campaigns, her coworkers, Brandon included. God, especially Brandon. I was planning a trip for our anniversary, I said quietly, more to myself than to them. 2 weeks in Maui. Flights booked, hotel paid for. I was going to surprise her next month. Cassidy made a small, wounded sound. Oh, Carter. I took a swig of beer and tried for humor, my voice coming out rough. Guess I'll take Drew instead. Turn it into a bros retreat. Drew forced a grin. I'm in. Cassidy can survive without me for 2 weeks. She'll probably enjoy the peace and quiet, Cassidy shot back, managing a tiny smile. About 30 minutes later, as the crowd had thinned and people were making increasingly flimsy excuses to leave, a silver Mercedes eased into the driveway. Even from the patio, I recognized it. I'd seen it in Victoria's Instagram stories enough times, cropped just enough that only someone paying attention would notice. Brandon Pierce stepped out. He looked exactly like the type of guy a marketing agency would put on a brochure. Early 40s, carefully styled silver hair, artfully distressed jeans, and a shirt that probably cost more than my entire outfit. He took a deep breath, squared his shoulders, and walked around the side of the house into the backyard like he had every right to be there. Conversations died mid-sentence. Plastic cups stopped halfway to mouths. The only sound was the low thump of the music and the clink of ice settling in a glass. Carter, he said when he reached me, sticking out his hand like we were at some networking event. I think we should talk. I stared at his hand like it was something filthy. Talk about what? I asked flatly. How you've been sleeping with my wife for 8 months? Or how you've been helping her plan a divorce that would leave me gutted financially? Which part exactly do you think we need to talk about? A flicker of discomfort crossed his face. To his credit, he did at least have the decency to look uneasy. I never meant for it to get this far. Victoria and we just connected. Yeah, I cut in. I've heard the speech. You understand her in ways I don't. You make her feel alive. Save the script for someone who paid for her lifestyle while you two were sneaking around. I love her, Brandon said quietly, like that was some kind of moral get-out-of-jail-free card. Then congratulations, you can have her. She's inside packing her things right now. You get the tears, the drama, the lies, all of it. Just get off my property when you're done. He opened his mouth, probably to launch into another cliche, but before he could, Drew stepped between us. At 6'3" and built like the ex-linebacker he was, Drew could flip from easygoing friend to human brick wall pretty quickly. The man said leave, Drew told him, calm but firm. I'd do that.
Brandon glanced from Drew's shoulders to his face and apparently decided this wasn't the hill he wanted to die on. He gave a small nod, then walked toward the house. A minute later, Victoria emerged, dragging 2 suitcases and carrying her laptop bag. Her mascara had run, her hair, usually meticulously styled, was starting to frizz in the heat. She paused when she saw me watching her. Carter, she said, voice barely audible, I really am sorry. I never wanted it to end like this. How did you want it to end? I asked, with you walking away with half of everything I worked for while I sat in therapy trying to figure out why my marriage just didn't work out. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. She didn't have an answer. Brandon took the suitcases from her, loaded them into the trunk of his Mercedes, and opened the passenger door. Victoria hesitated for half a second, then got in. I stood there and watched my wife of 9 years drive away with another man, her silhouette framed by German engineering and 30 silent witnesses who'd just seen the most humiliating moment of my life.
After they turned the corner and disappeared, the party dissolved fast. People muttered apologies, half-hearted offers to check in later, then made quick exits. They couldn't wait to get to their cars, their group chats, their stories. In less than 20 minutes, the backyard was empty except for me, Drew, and Cassidy, surrounded by paper plates, half-eaten food, and abandoned drinks. "Do you want us to stay?" Cassidy asked softly. "We can help clean up or just sit." I shook my head, looking around at the wreckage. "I appreciate it," I said, "but I think I need to be alone for a bit, just to process." They both hugged me, Cassidy tight and maternal, Drew with that awkward, solid pat on the back guys do when they don't know what else to offer. Then they left too. The sun slowly slid down behind the fence line, painting the sky in oranges and purples, and I sat there on the patio I'd designed, in the backyard I'd built, in the house I thought represented a solid life. I thought about the night I proposed, the restaurant I'd saved up for, the ring I'd agonized over. I thought about our wedding, which had cost more than my first car, and how happy she'd looked walking down the aisle. I thought about every project we did on the house, every paint color we argued over, every light fixture we picked out together. How much of it had been real? Had she ever actually loved me? Or had I just been a solid platform she could stand on while she reached for something or someone she thought was better? As those questions circled in my head, my phone buzzed on the table beside me. A text from a number I didn't recognize. It was a picture. Victoria and Brandon curled up on a couch that clearly wasn't mine. A modern apartment, city lights out the window, 2 glasses of red wine in their hands, her legs tucked under her like she belonged there. Underneath the photo, one line. "Thought you should see this. They're not even trying to hide it anymore." Signed, Amber. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. Then I hit delete. I didn't need proof. I'd had an entire live audience for the truth in my own backyard. 30 people had watched my marriage implode in real time. Whatever Victoria and Brandon did after that was just the encore. Let them parade it around. Let people whisper. For once, the gossip wasn't going to be about what I might have done. It was going to be about what they actually did. I'd played my role. Faithful husband, hard worker, provider. My conscience was clean. That realization was the first small piece of solid ground I'd felt under my feet since the barbecue. The next morning, I called my lawyer. Her name was Patricia Morrison. I'd gotten her number from a client who'd been through a brutal divorce 3 years earlier and still spoke about her with something halfway between fear and gratitude. She'd said, "Come in first thing Monday. Bring everything you've got." Her office was in a glass building downtown, minimalist, expensive, and cold in that deliberate way that says, "We don't lose." When I sat down across from her, she folded her hands and got straight to the point. "Start at the beginning. Don't leave anything out," she said. So I told her. I told her about the barbecue, about Amber's drunken question, about the 8-month affair, about Victoria consulting divorce attorneys while still sleeping in my bed and planning to take half of everything I'd built. Patricia took notes, her pen moving in quick, precise strokes. Her face didn't show much, but her eyes got harder as I talked. When I finished, she leaned back and let out a slow breath. "Okay," she said. "First, the good news." I braced myself. "The house is safe," she said. "You bought it before the marriage. You improved it with money from a business that existed before the marriage. On paper, it's separate property. She can cry about 9 years of memories all she wants. Legally, it's yours." Some of the tension in my shoulders loosened. "And the bad news?" I asked. She tapped her pen against her legal pad. "The business," she said. My stomach sank. "During the marriage, did the company grow?" "Yeah, a lot. New contracts, new equipment, more employees. We did well." "Then," she said slowly, "depending on the numbers, she may have a claim on part of that growth, not the whole company, but possibly an interest in the increase in value during the marriage." "How much are we talking?" I asked. "Could be significant," she said bluntly, "but that's the worst case scenario, and that's why we're not walking into this blind." She leaned forward. "Oregon is no fault," she continued. "The court doesn't care who cheated when it comes to granting the divorce, but when we start talking about dividing assets, behavior matters, intent matters. If we can show a pattern of deception and a plan to use this marriage as a cash-out event, that changes things. What do you need? I asked. Everything, she said. Screenshots, texts, emails, any photos, names of people who were there that day, anyone who can testify to what she said, what Amber said, what Brandon said, any proof that she was planning a financial ambush while still playing the doting wife. Amber sent me a photo, I said, and about 30 people heard her admit the affair at the barbecue. For the first time, Patricia actually smiled. That's a very good start, she said. I want a full guest list. We'll see who's willing to put their name on a statement. People love to talk. We just need a few willing to talk under oath. The next weeks were an education in how oblivious I'd been. Drew and Cassidy confessed they'd noticed something off in Victoria's behavior long before the barbecue. Flirting that crossed lines, disappearing acts at parties, private conversations with Brandon that lasted a little too long. My accountant, a quiet guy who usually stuck strictly to numbers, mentioned that Victoria had called him twice in the last month, asking pointed questions about my company's value, assets, and accounts. At the time, he'd assumed she was planning some kind of surprise. My sister Natalie, who lived up in Seattle, admitted over the phone that she'd never fully trusted Victoria. "Why didn't you say anything?" I asked. "Because you sounded happy," she said, "and anytime I even hinted at not loving some little thing she did, you got defensive. You weren't ready to hear it, Carter." She wasn't wrong. I'd been more committed to the image of my life than to actually examining it. Patricia recommended a private investigator to help map out the whole picture. I hired him. 2 weeks later, he walked into Patricia's office with a thick folder and a story that made my situation look almost merciful in comparison. "Brandon Pierce," he said, sliding the file across the desk, "is still married." "Excuse me?" I said. "Legally married," he repeated. "Wife's name is Claire, lives in Seattle with their 2 kids. No legal divorce on record, no legal separation. He's been telling people he's divorced, but the paperwork doesn't exist." My jaw actually dropped. "When I say still married," the PI added, "I mean still sharing assets, which makes his involvement with Victoria messy. Financially, legally, morally, you pick." When I told Patricia, she looked positively delighted. "This just keeps unfolding," she said. "Get me copies of every document your investigator dug up, texts, social media posts, anything that shows the overlap between his marriage, your marriage, and their affair. Judges tend to take a dim view of people who treat spouses as interchangeable." Victoria was served with the divorce papers at Brandon's apartment, where, according to the investigator, she'd been staying since the night she left our house. Her response was exactly what we expected. She wanted everything. Half the business, half my retirement, a slice of the house despite the deed and dates, my truck, money for lost career opportunities, ongoing support. Her attorney, a bulldog named Denise Crawford, sent letters that read like bad fiction. Mrs. Jameson, one of them said, sacrificed her own professional ambitions and provided substantial emotional support and household management, which directly enabled the growth of Mr. Jameson's business and income. She is therefore entitled to a sizable share of all marital and quasi-marital assets. I snorted when Patricia read that out loud in her office. Emotional support? I said. She was sneaking around with a coworker for 8 months. That's a pretty twisted definition of support. "The good news," Patricia said calmly, "is that judges don't buy buzzwords. They look at actions. She kept her 6-figure job. You handled the majority of the household upgrades, and we have a mountain of evidence that far from supporting you, she was actively planning to blindside you." And the evidence just kept coming. Cassidy, who knew several women from Victoria's agency, found out the affair with Brandon hadn't exactly been discreet at work. It was practically office gossip. People had seen them leave events together, arrive late to meetings together, disappear for brainstorming sessions that lasted hours. A few were willing to talk. Some even agreed to give statements describing Victoria's open discussions about doing this smart and making sure I get what I deserve when she left the marriage. Then I got a call from an unknown Seattle number. "Is this Carter?" a woman asked. "Yes. This is Claire, Brandon's wife." We talked for over an hour. "He's done this before," she told me, "more than once. He finds someone new, says his marriage is basically over, promises them a future, then when it stops being exciting or financially convenient, he leaves, or he tries to juggle. Either way, people get hurt. Does Victoria know he's still married to you? I asked. She thinks they're soulmates, Claire said dryly. Last time I checked, he was still telling her our relationship had been dead for years, that the divorce was just delayed paperwork. That line hasn't changed in a decade. I realized then that whatever Victoria thought she was doing, she'd jumped onto a sinking ship. She has no idea what she's gotten herself into, I said. Nope, Claire agreed, but that's not our job to fix. She was right. I couldn't save Victoria from the man she'd chosen over me. The legal process dragged on for 4 months. 4 months of statements, depositions, financial disclosures, and cold business-like emails about the dismantling of a life. Victoria's stance never really shifted. She was a wronged woman entitled to a payday. She claimed she'd pressed pause on promotions to stabilize the home. She claimed my success was as much her accomplishment as mine. On paper, though, the story was different. Her salary had gone up over the years. Her travel for work had increased. Her hours were long, her events frequent. The homemaker who sacrificed everything narrative didn't quite match the actual timeline. Patricia was merciless. Amber, sober and eaten up with guilt, gave a statement about that day at the barbecue, about what Victoria had told her regarding the timing of the affair and her plans for the divorce. Coworkers from the agency backed up the pattern, the flirting, the affair, the comments about cashing out smart. Screenshots showed flirty texts, hotel bookings, and messages about what I can get out of this.
He flipped another page. Mrs. Jameson will retain her personal belongings and the vehicle registered in her name. There will be no spousal support, no share of Mr. Jameson's retirement accounts, no claim to additional assets. He closed the file. This court finds that Mrs. Jameson's conduct, specifically her infidelity and her calculated approach to this divorce, constitutes a forfeiture of the equitable benefits she now seeks. Divorce granted. The sound of the gavel echoed through the room like a door slamming shut. Victoria broke down in tears. Denise leaned in, whispering urgently, already talking appeals and motions and reconsideration. But the judge had seen enough. So had I. Outside the courtroom, as Patricia went to file the final paperwork, Victoria approached me. "Carter, please," she said, mascara streaked down her cheeks. "I have nothing. How am I supposed to live?" For a second, the old instinct kicked in, the part of me trained to fix things for her, to protect her from consequences. Then I remembered her standing in my backyard, staring at me while her best friend listed out her plans to take me for everything. "That's not my responsibility anymore," I said. "You made your choices." "But Brandon," she started, then stopped. "Let me guess. Brandon suddenly wasn't as in love when it turned out you weren't bringing half my assets with you." The look on her face told me everything I needed to know. Once it was clear she'd be starting over with just her own income and belongings, Brandon had downgraded her from soulmate to inconvenience. "That's not fair," she whispered. "No, it's not. Neither was pretending to love me while you planned an exit strategy. Neither was making me look like a fool in front of 30 people at my own house. Neither was asking for half of everything I built while calling us basically roommates behind my back." I stepped away. "Life isn't fair, Victoria," I said. "You taught me that." And I walked off without looking back. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I sold the house. On paper, I'd won it outright. In reality, every room was a landmine. The kitchen where we'd hosted dinners, the bedroom where she'd texted him while I showered, the fire pit where I had imagined future kids roasting marshmallows. I couldn't relax there anymore. Every improvement I'd made now felt tied to a life that hadn't really existed. I bought a smaller place, closer to my office. Nothing fancy, just solid. A blank slate, no shared memories embedded in the drywall. My business, meanwhile, didn't just survive, it thrived. Drew officially became a full partner. We picked up a big infrastructure contract with the city, then another. The story of that barbecue got around in the contractor community faster than any marketing campaign could have done. But instead of mockery, I got something I hadn't expected: solidarity. Guys I barely knew pulled me aside at conferences and job sites. "Heard what happened, man. Been there."
And then they'd share their own horror stories, affairs, hidden debts, secret accounts. Some of them were still in the middle of it. Some had already rebuilt. It helped more than I wanted to admit, knowing I wasn't the only one who'd been blindsided. Eventually, I started dating again, carefully. My first real attempt was with Riley, an engineer in the city planning department. I met her through work. She was part of the team reviewing one of our projects. She was sharp, direct, and had a dry humor that caught me off guard in a good way. On our third date, over tacos and beer at a small place downtown, I told her the condensed version of what happened with Victoria. She listened. No interruptions, no pitying noises, just attention. That must have been brutal, she said when I finished, having it all come out like that, publicly. It was. In the moment, I thought I was going to throw up or pass out. But honestly, looking back, I'm weirdly grateful it happened that way. How so? She asked. If Amber hadn't opened her mouth that day, I said, Victoria probably would have slow faded out of the marriage, filed with some vague reason like growing apart or communication issues. I'd have spent years wondering what I did wrong, wondering if I'd failed her. I shrugged. This way, I don't have to wonder. I saw it. Everyone saw it. There is no alternate version of the story where I'm secretly the bad guy. That kind of clarity hurts at first, but it's clean. Riley nodded slowly. That's a really healthy way to look at it. A lot of people would just stay stuck in the anger. Oh, I did the anger thing too, I said, but I didn't want to live there forever. As for Victoria, news still filtered back now and then, whether I wanted it or not. I heard she'd moved to California, new city, new job, new social circle. Brandon had dumped her shortly after the ruling, once it was clear aligning his life with hers was going to cost more than it paid. She'd burned so many bridges in Portland that sticking around wasn't really an option. Amber, wrecked with guilt, tried to stay her friend. Victoria blamed her for everything and cut her off. About a year after the barbecue, Amber texted and asked if we could meet for coffee. She showed up looking nervous, hands wrapped around her cup like it was the only thing anchoring her. I just wanted to say I'm sorry again, for that day, for how it came out. I was drunk and stupid, and I don't know what I thought, that you already knew, that I was helping by forcing it into the open. I replay it all the time. You did hurt me, I said. I won't pretend you didn't. She swallowed, eyes shining. But you also did something no one else was willing to do. You ripped the bandage off. Victoria destroyed our marriage months before that day. You just made it impossible for her to keep pretending. She blinked. You're thanking me? I'm thanking you for making sure I didn't spend the next 10 years living in a lie. I'd rather take one brutal afternoon of truth than a lifetime of slow deceit. She let out a breath she'd apparently been holding for a year. Victoria hates me, she said. She says you ruined my life. She ruined her life, I said quietly. You just exposed what was already true. 2 years have passed since that June barbecue. If you'd told me, sitting in that patio chair watching my wife leave with another man, that I'd be grateful for that day someday, I would have thought you were insane. But I am. That afternoon forced me to see things I was refusing to acknowledge. It shoved me out of a relationship that was at best half honest. It gave me the evidence I needed to walk away with my work intact, instead of watching it be dismantled piece by piece in court. It didn't heal overnight. I went through every stage: rage, humiliation, bargaining, depression. I grieved a future that was never actually real. But something came after all that: clarity. I started seeing all the red flags I'd ignored. The way she always needed an audience, the constant comparisons to other men who were more ambitious, more exciting, the way she treated our life as a stepping stone instead of a partnership. My new house isn't as flashy as the old one. No custom outdoor kitchen yet, no sprawling patio. But every project I start there, every wall I paint, every piece of furniture I build with my own hands, it's mine. Not ours, not mine until someone decides to cash out, just mine. The business is stronger than ever. Drew and I brought on a third partner. We hired 6 more employees. I'm more focused now. When I'm at work, I'm actually there, not mentally juggling a relationship that secretly stopped being real long before I found out. And Riley, we're taking it slow. No rushing, no fantasy building. She's direct. If something's wrong, she says so. If she's happy, I can tell without wondering who she's performing for. There's a simplicity in that honesty that feels astonishingly peaceful. Not long ago, I ran into one of the guests from that barbecue in the hardware store. He recognized me instantly. "Carter, right?" he said, shifting awkwardly. How are you doing after, you know?" "I'm good," I said, and as the words came out, I realized they were true. "Really good, actually." He looked relieved. "Man, that whole day was rough to watch." "It was rough to live," I said, "but I've come to see it differently." "How so?" "Sometimes things have to break all the way before you can rebuild them properly. That day broke everything, but it also gave me a clean foundation to start over." He nodded slowly. "That's honestly a solid way to look at it." Driving home, I thought about how much had changed because one drunk woman asked one reckless question over a tray of burning chicken. 30 people watched my life fall apart. At the time, I thought it was the end of everything. It wasn't. If you're watching this because you're in that place, because you found out about an affair or a betrayal or some secret that makes you question your whole life, here's what I can tell you from the other side. It does get better. Not quickly, not neatly, but it does. If you're willing to look at the truth instead of the story you wish were true, you can rebuild something stronger than what you lost. A few things I learned the hard way. Don't ignore your gut. Don't write off your discomfort just because the truth would be inconvenient. Watch what people do, not what they say about themselves. And when someone shows you who they are, believe that version, not the one you've invented for them. And if you ever find yourself at a party or a barbecue where someone's drunk friend starts blurting things that make your stomach drop, pay attention. The people with the worst timing are often the ones telling truths everyone else is too polite or too afraid to say. I rebuilt my life from the ashes of that afternoon. New house, stronger business, healthier relationship. Most importantly, a better understanding of myself and what I will and won't accept. Sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is having your comfortable lies set to fire so you can finally see clearly.